Hello, everybody, and welcome to Answers for August 18th, 2020. I'm Kevin Daly. On today's Answers, there will be a school update by yours truly. There will be a point of information by Cindy Curtis. There will be a school at home update by Audra Talbot. My guest this week is Jan Hochadel, president of AFT Connecticut. And as always, there will be time for Q&A with participants. If you have a question during my interview with Jan, please hit that Q&A button and send it on to us. Answers is brought to you by PATH, Parent to Parent, Family Voices of Connecticut, a nonprofit organization which for more than 30 years has served families in Connecticut that have children with special health care needs. All the services and programs that PATH provides are at no cost to the parents we serve. And here in front of you, you see a short list of some of the programs and services. Earlier editions of this webinar are available on YouTube, on the PATH YouTube channel. To get there, and there's also a lot of other interesting information. To get there, go to YouTube and just do a search for PATH, Parent to Parent, Family Voices, or I suppose you could use the easy to remember link that you see in blue at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions about PATH or you'd like to know more about it, please visit our website at pathct.org. And while you're online, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. If you have questions about this webinar, please feel free to contact me directly, Kevin Daly, at kdaly@pathct.org. And here's the fine print. This webinar is not intended to be legal advice. It's not intended to be healthcare advice. It's not intended to be advice of any kind. This is a webinar about searching for answers at a time when people have a lot more questions than answers. This webinar and any attached materials are the sole property of PATH and are not to be used for any other purpose without the express written permission of PATH. Now, the school update for August 18th. It's midsummer, and summer is about to fade. The school year is near. Time is almost up. The question parents are asking themselves are you ready? Over the summer, there's been a great national debate about opening schools. The debate revolves around two key issues. How should schools reopen? And what precautions should be taken when they open? Now, let me explain. During the summer, school districts across the nation have been making plans to reopen schools in one of three different scenarios. The full in-person learning scenario, where everyone goes to school like it used to be, full remote learning, which will be similar to distance learning, although this time it counts, or a combination of the two, a partial or hybrid learning model. A question to answer is, what mode should we start in when schools reopen? And what does it take to transition from one mode to another? Now, by precautions, I mean the debate about face covers, masks, social distancing, cleaning, sanitizing, crowd control in the schools, and more. Even the use of counselors and social workers to assist with emotional needs. And what if it's determined that students in a school have been exposed to the virus? What's an appropriate containment plan? The great national debate has swirled around issues like this. Meanwhile, school districts around the country have announced their plans for reopening. This has only added to the debate. Some say the reopening plans go too far. Some say the reopening plans don't go far enough. Let's take a look state by state. But first, here's an important point. All these reopening plans are subject to change by local officials and agencies. and they could change at any time. For example, executive orders by a governor or directives from public health authorities. That said, here are how things stand as of today, August 18th, as reported by Education Week. Right now, 36 states are leaving the decision to reopen up to local school districts, and Connecticut is one of those states. Typically, school districts in these states are directed to develop reopening plans and submit them to their state Department of Education for approval. Although there are some differences. For example, in Utah, the decision to reopen is up to local school districts. However, school districts need to meet some state-ordered minimum requirements before they can open for in-person learning. In Arizona, the decision to reopen is up to local school districts. However, the state has ordered school districts to consider certain criteria when deciding to reopen, such as the positivity rate and the amount of community spread. These 6 states have a state-ordered closure or a delay of some kind in effect. For example, in New Mexico, where schools usually start in early to mid-August, the state has delayed in-person classes until September 8th. Schools can start earlier with remote learning, and when students return in that state, it will be under a hybrid model. In Arkansas, where schools usually open in mid-August, the governor will not allow schools to reopen until August 26th. And when the schools reopen, they'll be required to offer in-person learning 5 days a week. In Rhode Island, where schools usually reopen in late August to early September, the governor has delayed the start of classes until September 14th, and the final decision on reopening schools for in-person learning won't be made until later this month. 2 states, California and Mississippi, have state-ordered regional closures in effect right now. In California, where schools usually open in early August, counties that are on the state's coronavirus watch list for more than 14 consecutive days must provide remote learning only. In Mississippi, where schools usually reopen in early August, the governor has ordered 8 counties to delay the start of school until August 17th. 3 states, Virginia, North Carolina, and Delaware, are allowing only hybrid or remote learning when their schools reopen. In Delaware, it's being done by executive order of the governor. In Virginia, the social distancing measures for in-person learning are so strict that school districts really have no choice but to offer a mix of remote and in-person learning. This is similar to North Carolina, where schools will reopen under a state-ordered plan to limit attendance that will effectively require hybrid learning. These 4 states have ordered their school districts to provide in-person learning. In Texas, all school districts must provide daily in-person learning 5 days a week. School districts are allowed to limit attendance for the first 4 weeks of school, and after that, a state-issued waiver would be required. In Iowa, the governor has ordered every student to spend at least half of their schooling inside classrooms, although parents are allowed to opt out in favor of online learning. In Missouri, students must be in school at least 2 days a week. Exceptions require a state-approved waiver. In Florida, the schools must be open at least 5 days a week. Parents are allowed to opt out in favor of remote learning. Put it all together and you get one colorful map. Meanwhile, in Connecticut, school districts have developed their own reopening plans. Their plans have been approved by the State Department of Education at this point. And at this point, the school districts should be making an effort to outreach their plans to the families of their students. As in other states, Connecticut school districts have been planning for full in-person learning, partial or hybrid learning, full remote learning, and Connecticut parents have the option to opt out of in-person learning. And there's been much guidance for school districts to follow, guidance from the governor and the State Department of Education. Addendum 6, the reopening guidance for educating students with disabilities, is especially interesting. It was issued just last week. It addresses these important matters and more. And when I read the guidance, here are some important points that jumped out at me. I think the most important one is that parents and student rights have not changed. School obligations to parents and students are still the same. That has not changed. Special education must be provided under all 3 learning models. This is different from distance learning that we experienced last spring, when in many ways it didn't count, even though special educators, like all educators, made a heroic effort to keep learning going. This time it counts, and special education must be provided in all 3 learning models. And schools need to inform parents of the consequences of going from one model to another. This is based on a legal concept called informed consent. When both sides move forward knowing fully the consequences of their actions. There will still be PPT meetings, and they'll be held remotely for the foreseeable future. IEPs should be developed as if things were operating normally, and schools should be ready to enforce IEPs starting on day 1. Years ago, talk had it that was a problem, decades ago in Connecticut schools, where many parents were told, oh, we don't start special education for at least a month, not till we get to know the kids. So the state guidance says quite clearly, special education starts on day 1. All this guidance from the governor, from the State Department of Education, there's no substitute for reading this guidance yourself, along with the other guidance that was issued to the school districts. You can find them by going to ct.gov. This is the state's portal for their website. Click around, you'll find what I'm talking about. The next edition of Answers will be 1 week from today, August 25th, 2020. My guest during the next edition of Answers will be clinical psychologist Adrian Smaller. And Dr. Smaller is going to talk about the emotional health of our children as they make the transition back to school, where things are going to be very different. And she's going to talk about ways that parents and families can help preserve the emotional health of their children. I hope you can join us. Now, a point of information with Cindy Curtis. This is a new segment. Cindy is a parent and an advocate. Let's welcome Cindy.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm so pleased to be here this evening and joining the team and helping to share the information, because it certainly can be confusing out there. And I think this is just a terrific forum to help spread the information and educate all of us as we do it. Point of information is going to be, going forward, a relatively short segment in each of our meetings, and we're going to pick different topics. Hopefully that'll be of interest to you and help you to understand your rights as a parent, or other relatively brief but important pieces of information that can help you when you're working with the school district or advocating for your child. So as I'm sure you're aware of, no matter what aspect, parent participation is obviously key in advocating for your children, understanding what their needs are, understanding their programs within the school district. And actually, it is part of the federal and state law that usually it's done through PPT meetings, IEPs, but that parent participation is legally required. One of the ways to do that is often, to be honest, when my son was young and I was entering the realm of special education and understanding it, one of the ways to really do that is to request your child's formal school records. And so that's what we're going to talk about a bit this evening, just how to go about doing it and why it's important. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is why it's important to obtain a copy of your child's education records. And first of all, these are the files that the school makes decisions for the educations and the supports for your children. The types of things that you'll find in here are things like report cards, progress reports, but also all the evaluations. There are also, if there's behavioral issues, there really is just an enormous amount of information in these files. The other reason why you want this information is it really can help you to support why or why not your child is or isn't receiving services. Because again, there's just so much information in there that helps you to support what you're trying to get for your child. School records kind of tails along with the same thing. School records can provide you with a much fuller picture of how your child is doing in school. So as an advocate, and when I am parent to my son, one of the things that I would do sometimes is take report cards from one year to the next and go look at, each year he's struggling in this and, not closing that gap, right? So you can use information that's in there, and it really does convey for you sometimes a really good picture of what's going on. It's also important to review these, get these and review these school records to confirm that all the documents have been included. So the schools work with laws around keeping school records. They take it very, very seriously. But I personally have run into a couple of occasions personally where records have been missing. I haven't seen it often, but if you're doing outside evaluations with your children or your child and you provide it to the school, it's really important that all of that information be in there. Because again, when you're working with the team, you often want to look back, see where a child was, and it can be exceedingly difficult to recreate that information. And as we all know, the team players change. So, what some people knew inside and out about your child is no longer the case. And as I said, like most things, it's the law. It's the Family Education Rights and Privacy, FERPA, and it gives the parents the right to see and have photocopied all school records. So the next thing we want to talk about is how do you go about requesting school records? So all requests should be made in writing. And in fact, I would say that about all communications with the school or all requests to the school, it's always good to have it documented for your records. And email is fine to use for requesting your school records or any other requests that you're making from the school district. You can send your request, typically I say to the person that you have a working relationship with. If you don't, send it to the school principal. You can also send it to a case manager or a special education teacher. If you need the records for a meeting, something like a PPT meeting for an IEP, then legally the school district must provide it to you in 5 school days. If this isn't the case, the school district must provide it to you within 10 school days. When you're asking for the request, I think it's really important that you be specific on what you're looking for, because especially for our special ed kids, there are a lot of different files. So you want to ask for the cumulative file. You want to ask for the confidential file. You want to ask for a file that contains any information on discipline, and certainly ones on attendance. Different school districts have different processes of where they store the files and who's responsible for them. And so we just don't want the school to assume, this piece goes and this piece doesn't. You want to ask for all the information so that you have that pertaining to your child. And what I've provided here is just a really basic sample request where you're simply asking, hey, this is my son and daughter. You don't need to explain why you're asking for this, nor do I think that they will ask, nor should they. And it's just basically saying, I would like a copy of this. You can ask them to mail it to you. You can provide your phone number and pick it up from them. If you wanted other ideas, honestly, if you go out on the internet, there are just so many different examples of things that you can use. There are samples out there that cite the law. Personally, I try to keep it kind of friendly, but there's no reason, if you really feel that the school district is giving you a tough time, there are laws that are supporting all of these requests that are being made here, and it's certainly appropriate to cite them when needed. And then the last thing I provided here is, what would we do without acronyms? So this is several that were used in the presentation. Some you may be familiar with, others not. But it's really kind of interesting because as you go through the process, or at least I felt this way as a parent, especially if you are struggling with your relationship with the school, you really feel like your rights as a parent are minimal, when in fact they are not. And there are an incredible number of laws to help protect parent rights. So hopefully in the future we'll be talking about some of those more, but these are some of the key things that we talked about today and are important for you to know. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cindy.
You're welcome.
Excellent, and welcome to Answers.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
I did have a question for you about school records.
Sure.
It sounds like the school records are yours for the asking if you're a parent. But is right now the right time to ask for school records, or is there a better time for a parent to ask for their child's school records?
Okay. Well, on the positive side, there is no predetermined time. So honestly, you can ask for them at any time. So it's not like you have to do it within the first month or 2 months or whatever. However, I would suggest if you do not have a current copy of your children's records, I would really try to put it on your priority list to get that copy within the first month or two when your child starts school again. Again, it's a fairly simple letter. The school takes care of all the copying for you. It's provided to you free of charge. It's really, you don't need to do anything with it right at that point. If you can kind of read it and go through it at your leisure. Throwing all the information into a binder, although sometimes seems overwhelming in the long run, it really benefits you. But I would suggest, if at all possible, if you don't have this information, to request it within the first month or two of school. If not, certainly you can do it later on in the school year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Cindy, and thank you for the report. We will now move on. Coming up will be my interview with Jan Hochadel, the president of AFT Connecticut. But first, a school at home update with Audra Talbot. Leah is a parent in central Connecticut. Her son Matthew has autism, ADHD, and social anxiety. Matthew is bright and he does well academically, but he struggles with social and emotional difficulties. Audra interviewed Leah for one of our previous webinars in April. At the time, Matthew was a middle school student. Now Matthew is transitioning to his first year of high school. Earlier, Audra talked with Leah to catch up on Matthew. Let's listen in.
Last time we talked in the spring, Matthew was participating in distance learning. You were making a great effort to keep Matthew on schedule. And you were doing a fabulous job at it, by the way.
Thank you.
And a great effort to keep learning going at home. How well did the distance learning experience work for Matthew?
Well, as far as keeping him on track and on schedule, we managed to do that. I'm not going to lie, it was difficult at times. It actually ended up putting a strain on our relationship, I think, a little bit, because I was more like in almost like I don't know if necessarily it was a teacher role, but it was a different role than being, mom and the person who's there to, comfort and care and guide and it did definitely put a strain on our relationship. We managed to get him through though, and he got done when he needed to get done. He stayed on top of things, and he did really well with his grades. So we did get through it, but not without difficulties.
I understand that, Leah. Yeah,
Yes.
I got fired by my kid, if you remember.
Yes.
Like within
Yeah, my son made it known that I was not liked very much by him during that time.
Sometimes it means you're doing the right thing, yeah.
Basically, yeah.
So did Matthew go to camp this summer?
He did. He's actually in camp this summer. That is part of his ESY program. He's at a camp that includes children of all abilities, and he was accepted into the counselor in training program, which he had some struggles with in the beginning. It was definitely a learning experience for both of us. I think that I took for granted the fact that, he had been at that camp, for several years or several summers in a row. And I don't think I asked enough questions about the counselor and training program to make sure everything was going to be set up so that he would be successful, or as successful as he could be. So I learned that going into it, I probably should have asked a little more about it, as far as, the expectations and how, what we could do to help Matthew through that, what kind of accommodations maybe he might have needed, things like that. So he had a little bit of trouble, and it all stemmed back to the social aspects of it. And what I thought was going to be a situation that wasn't going to turn out as well, because he was so excited about being accepted into the program. It's something he really, really wanted. And it was starting to look like that was going to be removed and taken away from him. And for like a week straight, I was trying to figure out every way that I could to get them to modify and accommodate so that he could continue in the program, but at his pace. And I felt like I was not being successful in my efforts. And when the day came that we had to sit down with Matthew as a group and meet with him, the camp counselors and myself, I wasn't sure what the outcome was going to be, because Matthew can be very emotional and get down on himself, and I thought that this wasn't going to have a great impact on him. And it turns out I was very pleasantly surprised. Matthew sat down and he advocated for himself. He was very mature about it, very well spoken, expressed his feelings, needs, and wants. The counselors were incredible. They were receptive to it and listened to what they were hearing from him. And Matthew was very persistent. And all the things that I had been trying to manage and work out through that whole week before, where I felt like I wasn't really getting anywhere with, Matthew got a yes to all of them from the counselors. Yes. So long story, but Matthew's still in the program. They've made some modifications and things are going well. We've also are working with the school lead behaviorist, who was given a list of Matthew's strengths and areas of opportunities as it pertains to the CIT program. And they're going to be working with him as well. And he is going to be invited back in the years to follow to continue in the program. So we're going to work together a little bit more, or better anyway, to make sure that he's successful in the program, because it's something he really wants.
That's great. And you found a way to do it. And you used all that experience you've had over the years advocating for him. But I think what sticks out to me the most is how he
Yes.
advocated for himself.
Yes.
So
I was so proud of him. I completely agree with you. I was so proud of him. And this isn't the first time it's happened, actually, with camp, because there was another time that I tried to get something accomplished that he wanted. I was unsuccessful. He went to bat for himself and got it.
Yeah.
So I love it when he's able to do that. I think it's awesome that he can do that and he's able to do that. And I think it's a really important skill for him to have, given, well, for anyone actually, but especially given his needs.
Yeah,
So,
that's a functional life skill.
yes.
In my book, it is. Yeah. So congratulations to both of you for that.
Thank
one.
you. Thank you.
This year, parents can opt out of in-person classes and use remote learning instead. What did you choose for Matthew this year?
We chose to have him go. I'm going to be honest. I'm really nervous about it, given the current COVID situation. If it weren't a key year where he's entering his first year of high school, I think I would have. I would have preferred to have chosen the distance learning, see how things went, and then decide from there. His particular school district, whatever option you choose, if you decide you want to change it, you can't do it until the semester's over. So I would have preferred, I think, like I said, if it weren't a key year for him, I would have preferred to go the distance learning route, see how things played out, and then decide from there. However, I've discussed it with my husband, and we included Matthew in on the decision as well and explained everything to him. So we actually have chosen to send him. So his high school has, according to what we know so far, has separated the kids into 2 cohorts. And what's going to happen is he'll go to school every other day and then distance learn the other days. So for example, cohort 1, maybe the first week we'll go to school Monday, Wednesday, Friday, distance learn Tuesday, Thursday, and then the following week he'll go Tuesday, Thursday, and distance learn Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah, I just want to share with you, like, everybody's scared.
Yes.
Every parent is scared to send their kids back to school in the world.
I am. I'm concerned about. Yeah, I am. I am concerned. I am not. I'm not going to lie. So I'm saying a lot of prayers, crossing my fingers, hoping for the best. And I'm also concerned about the mask situation, also because he really has a difficult time with it. So we've been trying out all different kinds of masks, and kind of trying to gradually get him to the point where he'll be okay with wearing it while he's at school.
Yeah, because I think that's where it starts. It starts at home with the
Yes.
of teaching your kids, this is what you do. This is what you have to do, but here's why.
Right.
And in my situation personally, that's, I did the mask training a while ago, but it's still a maintenance thing for that, for one.
Yes.
But the other one, she's just like, why do I have to do it? Because it's more that rational thinker.
Right.
So,
he knows why. It's just, I think it's, he also, he has all this sensory issues, and sensory issues are another big thing with him. And the mask is just uncomfortable for him. It's just, he doesn't like it. It's uncomfortable. He doesn't want to wear it. And, but I keep explaining, and we're working on it. We're still working on it. So.
You're doing the right thing. Yeah. There's no other way to do it. You have to do it. Traditionally, middle school students who are headed to high school are allowed to visit the school and get acquainted with their new environment. That didn't happen last year because schools were closed because of COVID. What has your school district done to help Matthew transition to his new school?
Well, we're very fortunate because Matthew already has some experience at the school he's going to, because in the past he went to ESY there a long time ago, and he also attends some other programs there. However, he wasn't familiar with the entire school, and we were also very fortunate that I was able to make arrangements with the school to have him tour it on our own with the principal. So I was able to get that done, which I think is important for him. And I am working on trying to do it. I usually try to do it twice. At the end of the year, and then again before school starts. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. I still have a call in, and I'm waiting for an answer regarding that.
do you have any reservations about Matthew going back to school? Like, what are your big ticket items, really, you know, for your reservations? I know you're scared.
I am.
We all are. Just
Yes.
the overall scared parent first of the
Right.
school year, but then you add in there's a pandemic.
Yes.
And how are we going to do this? How are your kids going to go to school?
The class size concerns me because it's 25 students, and I think that concerns me. I think it's too many still. You know, when are they going to be taking temperatures? Who's going to be taking temperatures? Where are the, they're going to have how many sanitizing stations are they going to have? Where are they? Are they going to be in, Matthew needs guidance and prompting sometimes, just to be reminded, you need to sanitize your hands. You need to wash your hands. Is someone going to be there, to do those things? Are they going to be structured? There's a lot of things that are going through my mind. The main things for me, it's going to be the mask wearing, the sanitizing, the class size, the class size. I've seen things from other schools in other states, the hallway, the transitions between hallways, where the kids are they're on top of each other. I'm concerned about that. So I have more questions about that as well. Those are all my questions and concerns. And then just, of course, and how are they going to handle his programming with all of this, because like I said, his big area of need is the social aspect of it. That's huge. And that's a problem with COVID. So I'm trying to figure out how do we do this? How do we help him? How do we, have him recoup any, progress he's had made? Because of course he has regressed in those areas. And how are we going to do it this way?
At some point this year, Matthew's school might be ordered to close. Like I said, we should expect these things.
Correct.
You will have to go back to remote learning if that does happen. Are you and Matthew prepared for that within your house, mentally and physically?
Physically and in the house, yes. We're pretty well set up. We have 2 computers, 2 desks, things like that. So, logistically we're ready to go with that right away. So that's okay. Mentally and emotionally, that might be another thing for both of us, because it was hard. I was, there were days my husband would come home and I'm like, I gotta go. I need to leave now. I have to go. And I needed that break. And I'm sure he did too. So I think that I might need to revisit some of how we did things and how we handle things. I would still probably follow a schedule, but I don't know, maybe be a little more flexible, I think.
That's it for us tonight. Thank you everyone for watching CAF Parent to Parent Family Voices of Connecticut. This is Audra Talbot. See you later. Have a great week. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Audra, that was a great interview, as usual.
Thanks, Kevin.
It's interesting what Matthew accomplished in summer camp, the way that he was able to self-advocate, and he actually got farther than his own mother did trying to advocate for him. That's a huge step forward for this young man.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to how far he's come. So this was the second time that I had the pleasure of interviewing Leo. We did an interview way back when we kind of just launched into distance learning, and we were all just in the deep end of the ocean, and we just didn't know what we were doing. And now I see this transition in all of us, and parents, especially school staff, and in our kids, and how they've matured from this. Believe it or not, there's your silver lining, folks, is the maturity and the flexibility and the evolution that I've seen in my house with my 2, and what Leah's seen with her son. I think another really good point from that interview, I love interviewing Leah because she's just such a wealth of information, because she just knows her stuff as a parent. She does the research and then she's an actionable person. So that's what I really like about her, and she has a lot to tell about it and impart that wisdom to other parents. But something that struck a chord with me as I was listening to the interview again today was how she was scared. And as a parent of 2 kids that are special ed kids that are going into this kind of new era of either it's a hybrid, if you're homeschooling your kid, if you're, going full time back to school, we are all scared. And, I think that no one is alone in that part of it at all. And I drove my son today to his school, which is a school here in Connecticut. And it was just kind of like a meet and greet because he hasn't been there since March. So here in August, oh my gosh, how's this going to go down? He was thrilled, first of all, on the car ride, and very excited to go back to school. But it's the emotions I felt as a parent on the drive, because it's a little bit of a drive to get to the school. It's fear of the unknown. I think of, how do I trust this, that, we're going to go back to school and I'm probably just going to have to pull them out again because we're all going to go distance learning. Like I'm kind of like already set up to think that. And that's just me. And then kind of like this, oh good, I get to take a nap when they go back to school. So it's like this mix of emotions I felt driving. And I just wanted to let everybody know, you're probably going to feel that too. The first day of school, the first week of school, is that it's like this thing in your gut as a parent. You're like, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? Well, again, you have to trust your gut and you have to do what's right for your child, whatever your choice is from those 3 programs that you're being offered in your school district. So that's what I wanted to add in today, is I had that kind of epiphany as I was driving. But thanks for having me again. I appreciate it. And good luck to everyone out there.
Thanks, Audra. Okay, let's move on. Now it's time for my interview with Jan Hochadel, president of AFT Connecticut, and I'll have her on as soon as I get out of this PowerPoint. Hi, Jan.
Hello.
There you are. Hi, Jan.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Welcome to Answers, and thank you for appearing as my guest.
My pleasure.
So you were a high school science teacher in Connecticut schools, and you now head AFT Connecticut. AFT stands for the American Federation of Teachers, which is a federation of approximately 30,000 Connecticut teachers, school staff, school nurses, and other professionals in nearly 90 local unions across the state. So I'm very glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And let's start with something that happened to me this morning when I picked up the Hartford Courant and I saw the headline read, Teachers Union wants a 2-week delay. Now, I know this was not your union. It comes from a union that your union works closely with, but I'd like to get your reaction to that. What do you think of that?
Well, thank you for the question. And I do have to note, this is the other teacher union. There's 2 in the state, and we do collaborate and work together almost hand in hand. And I'm going to say that I agree in principle. I have many districts, and I'll give you an example of a conversation that I just had yesterday with Wyndham teachers. And, Wyndham has not even completed the analysis of their ventilation systems yet. So the teachers there don't even know if they're going back into a school that's going to keep them safe. So, if individual leaders decide that a delay is needed, we support that. But we also have teacher leaders that are asking, instead of, delaying schools for a couple of weeks, can't we distance learning? We figured this out, and that way we don't have to worry about at the end of the year. And I guess my stance is that it's whatever works for the distance, because they know the school community, they know the parents, they know the students, they know what the teachers are deciding. I think that's what's best for that community. And as long as, schools can meet the CDC, the DPH, and the OSHA requirements, that's when we should be going back to school. And, we feel that this approach is fair to the public, the educators, the family, and the current reopening plans.
Well, teacher unions in other states are very reluctant to accept their state's plans for reopening school districts. For example, in July, Florida's largest teachers union sued the state over reopening schools. Do you think we're going to see this as a trend with teacher unions in other states?
Well, hopefully not in Connecticut. I mean, we are the, nation's model. We have the lowest percentage, and I have to say, I am a national vice president for the American Federation of Teachers, so I do know the president of the FEA. And I can tell you that the lawsuit there was based on safe schools reopening, where COVID was, or still is, just spiraling out of control. With a governor that wasn't heeding science. He wasn't looking at what the percentage of that everybody was getting it. He wasn't looking at the science that now says that 10-year-olds and above are getting this disease. He wasn't looking at science. So I think everybody wants schools to reopen. We just heard it from a parent. We just we hear it from everybody. We hear it from our teachers. Everybody wants schools to reopen. But they don't want to begin in-person teaching, and then face this explosion of cases and sicknesses, and then be forced to return to distance learning. In the Florida Constitution demands public schools be safe, like I think every, state constitution is. And the parents and the teachers there just want schools to meet that basic standard. So I think we're going to have to watch for infection rates. And, as schools open and, watch how governors and commissioners react and to know what other states are doing and to see if they're going to follow suit. I think it's going to be based on science.
Excellent. Now tell me something. What do you think of Connecticut's plan to reopen public schools?
I have to applaud the move from everybody, going back full time to, allowing the hybrid plans. I do think that as we near the start of the school year, equity is going to require that we allow districts to start as they see fit, and that might be distance learning, like the example I said above, I Wyndham, and it's probably true of, Hartford, and I represent New Haven, the same thing. They don't have the resources yet to safely open. So if you don't have the resources and you cannot say that the students are going to be safe and the teachers and the whole school community are going to be safe, I think they have to be flexible.
That flexibility is important because it's really the pandemic and the virus that's driving everything. At least it should be.
Absolutely.
Now, what about special education students? How do you think they're going to be affected by all this?
And as a mother who had a son, who I had special concerns, the inequity that we had in education, and I'm not even just talking Connecticut, across the United States, the inequities in education is being amplified. And, maybe that's a positive of COVID. I don't know, because we have to resolve this. We have to find out how we take care of our special education students, the students, the Black and brown students in our communities. Let's face it, they are in the communities where the probability of their parents not having the option of working at home, but having to go to work every day is high. The probability that someone they know is going to have COVID and possibly be affected by it is high. And now they're going to be coming back to school with these issues. And how are we going to address them? So I'm really, really proud last Friday that the state has embraced a social emotional learning program. And I think we heard it from some of your last folks that were talking about it. We need to meet people where they are. There are folks that are scared. There are people that don't know how to control their emotions about what they've gone through. We have to equip our educators with the tools to understand how to deal with their emotions so that they are helpful to those that are around them. And that might be students, it might be coworkers, it might be parents, and help them work through their emotions. Because, you know, it's Maslow's pyramid. If we cannot feel safe and have everybody around us feel safe, there's not learning that's going to happen. So I think we really have to embrace people where they are, but we also have to take care of those students that have fallen behind because of this.
Well, keeping that in mind, what would be a more appropriate way to reopen schools, not just for special education students, but for all the students? What do you think?
So I think my understanding of the governor and the Department of Education pushing for a, you know, opening as much as possible is for a couple of reasons. And, you know, one is the feeling that you have to have that face-to-face with the educator and the student in order to establish that critical relationship. It is powerful. And, you know, the other thing is that, you know, most people agree that there's a real possibility that we're going to be back to distance learning, you know, if there's a research in, you know, weeks, months, we don't know what that's going to look like. So we need to take advantage of the time we have with the students. And I fully understand that, and it's completely reasonable. But if we can't meet that minimum safety standard again, to make people feel that they're, you know, comfortable and safe, then it's hard to build those relationships in order to learn. So to answer the question, I think we just need to meet the districts where they are. You know, if they have to start with distance learning, that works for certain districts, that's fine. If other people feel that they can fully reopen and they can meet all the safety standards, that's fine. I just think we have to accept that the districts know what's best for their community, for their students, and their educational families.
Okay, fair enough. Now, on the subject of school districts, there's been criticism, and it has been said that the state has essentially passed the buck to local school districts when it comes to planning their reopening and planning protections for their students and teachers and paying for them. It's been said that the state failed to pass the buck in that capacity because it takes money to reopen schools properly, and many school districts just don't have proper funding. Do you agree?
So first of all, I have to say, I have to give credit to those at the State Department because I have worked with them for the last 6 months, and they are trying to do the best they can. You know, as people say, in a hurricane on a sandy beach with the sand moving beneath you. You know, it's very difficult to figure out where we are and where we're going. And I'll try to be as apolitical as possible. I am a teachers union, so, you know, but when districts submitted their plans, there was always this hope that there would be federal funds from the CARES and the HEROES, you know, money. And so very few districts are going to be able to safely open without that additional funding. So I think there's a couple of things that we can all agree on. You know, schools have been defunded for a long time because we've allowed austerity budgets, and I won't go into that. But what people have a hard time agreeing on is how are we going to best fund our schools? And I think as a society in Connecticut, we have to decide once and for all, how are we going to best and fully fund our school systems? So again, I have my views on that. I don't know if you want to go there, but you know, that's my.
Well, let's go there. What do you think should be the role of our federal government in helping schools to reopen?
I fully think what they have to do is pass the HEROES Act as Congress put it forward. I don't think we can afford anymore to give the wealthiest people in our nation extra tax cuts. Those tax cuts should be going towards education. Connecticut is one of the wealthiest states, and the fact that we haven't figured this out I scratch my head at. Why can't we figure this out? Why can't we have a fair taxation? Why can't we have companies like, and I'm going to go there, like Walmart, that employs, a certain percentage, but doesn't even pay a minimum wage, that the actual state has to subsidize the people that work there. So the state taxpayers are paying for them when, Walmart's making a profit on it. There's so many things that we have to look at in the tax structure that we have in the state. If we could even move that dial 1%, we could get education correct.
I see. Now, I know that many of your members are dissatisfied with the plans to reopen schools. They want to take action to protect themselves, and that's quite reasonable. Teachers don't strike, and I realize that, although many, many years ago when I was in college, and I'd rather not count the number of years, but I will say Richard Nixon was president, I actually saw teachers striking in Hartford, walking a picket line outside a public school. Are we headed in that direction again?
That is an excellent question. And I have to tell you, I get emails daily with that same thing. So first, I just have to say, it is illegal for teachers and paraeducators in Connecticut to strike. But as a union that supports them, we need to make sure that their voices are heard. So, there's things that we can do without an actual strike. I think everybody heard about the car caravans that have been happening. We have done walk-ins, we have done walkouts. There's things that we can do on social media. Their voices definitely need to be heard. And educators need to be aware that, it just doesn't, they have to be careful of their First Amendment rights. And it's hard to explain that to people because, everybody thinks I can just say whatever I want. But when we're actually talking about social media and talking to the press and things like that, if an educator talks about their district specifically or their school and says derogatory things, the First Amendment doesn't necessarily apply to them. So I caution people, first of all, on things that we can do, because we want to make sure that everybody has their voices heard, but we also have to make sure that they are not disciplined for that. So, we have to be careful. And I think a lot of our teachers are very excited. They've seen the LA strike. They've seen the Chicago strikes, right? They're very excited about, what that got them. But they also have to understand that there are different laws in different states about striking. And honestly, those strikes, I know those two leaders, they sit on the national board with me. Those strikes were 2 years in the making. These aren't something that you turn around on a dime and say, next week we're going to strike. That's not the way it works. And that's not helpful for the teachers. It's not helpful for the parents, and it's not helpful for the students at all.
The car caravans, it sounds so intriguing. Could you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. And I have to say, back in the spring, I remember hearing that the car caravans were happening, and it was the elementary schools. I happen to live in Meriden, and I heard the Meriden elementary school teachers were driving through, and they were honking, and they had the posters, and they were saying to their students, "I missed you." It was moving. It was really, and I remember everybody in the community came out and they're like, "What is this?" And, everybody was explaining, and they're saying, "Oh, the teachers miss their students." It was powerful. So people started thinking, well, that's a safe way to get messages out. So a couple of weeks ago, there were districts that said, we're going to do the same thing. But instead of saying we miss our students, we're going to be talking to the adults, and we're going to say, we want to go back. We want to teach your child, but we need to do it safely. And not only for ourselves, but for your child. If it's not safe for me to go back to school, it's not safe for your child. There's so many things in a school district. And again, it goes back to equity. You know, does the school system have the proper HVAC? Do they have the funding for the PPE, for the plexiglass that's going to go up in the main office? If the answer is no, then we have to think of the alternative. And so I think some of these actions are helping getting our voices out there that shows the inequity in some of our schools.
Well, teachers are known, at least the teachers I've met, they're known to be very enthusiastic about their jobs and their professions, their careers. So I can just imagine what a car caravan must have looked like. I'm sorry I didn't see one.
It was great.
Now, back in May, there was a poll conducted by USA Today. And in that poll, a nationwide poll, not Connecticut, but a nationwide poll, 20% of the teachers who responded said they were unlikely to return to classrooms in the fall, either by retiring or moving on to other positions. And the figure was 70% for teachers who have 30 years or more of experience. Are you seeing this in Connecticut?
Absolutely. We did a poll a few weeks ago. I think it was more than 20% said that, you know, there's just, it's either for themselves. We do have a large percentage of folks that are over 60, which is the report that you get it, you know, worse. We have folks that have, like myself, I am a teacher. I would have a hard time going back. I just went through a cancer scare 2 years ago. So, you know, there are those teachers that think, you know, I can't get this, or it's going to be bad, or they live with somebody. So I do think, you know, just like we heard on your last interview, you know, people are scared. Our teachers are scared. They not only don't want to get this for themselves and the loved ones, the worst thing I can think of is going in and actually giving it to a child. You know, there's so many emotions that are going on. We have to be respectful for those people.
Well, that's understandable. Now, about distance learning, and I want to distinguish it from remote learning, which is one of the 3 modes of learning that we are possibly going to be going into, but distance learning, the learning that started in mid-March and went until the end of the school year. What are your members telling you? Did they feel it was effective at all?
You know, if you had asked me that a few months ago, I would have probably said it depends on your zip code. You know, when March and April happened, I had certain districts that said, we got this. You know, we were prepared. We were kind of doing it anyway. So we found out on Thursday that this was going to happen Monday. We were able to make the switch, no problem. And they, you know, they had all the professional development. They had everything. And then there were districts that, you know, they don't have the resources. They don't even have the resources to manage the day-to-day in a school. They hadn't even thought about the possibility of this happening. So I don't think spring, you know, the inequity of last spring was horrific. I won't even beat the bush. But did we learn from that? Absolutely. Are we asking for exemplar models on how to improve? Absolutely. Are we asking for professional development in how everybody can achieve? Absolutely. And again, back to that social and emotional learning piece, to make sure that we're getting to the basic model. Because again, if we're not getting to the social and emotional person underneath, you're not going to learn. So I think we have learned a lot and we've grown. I think we're at a better place than we were last spring. Are we at the ultimate place? Probably not. Everybody has a little bit of learning to do. But I do think that we've learned a lot from last spring and we're definitely in a better place.
Well, that's good to know, because my next question is really about the remote learning that is going to be taking place. Do you think this is going to be an improvement over distance learning?
you know, this pandemic has stressed out the public education as well as educators, and absolutely, you know, we know the funding and inequity issues in education. You know, we need those exemplar models. You know, we need to close that achievement gap. We need to do what's necessary to help the educators best serve the public. And I do have to say too, you know, I have to look at the bright side. You know, we've gone through this horrific experience and we don't know if there's an end to it, right? And I have to say that at the end of it, we have to look back and say, we're going to see the inequities even more drastic than we ever have before. So what have we learned, you know, with the distance learning? What have we learned from whatever hybrid model we come up with? What have we learned that we can use those tools that when we get to this new norm, whatever that looks like, that we can actually push those students, those, you know, special ed students, those ELL students, those students that don't have the resources at home and things like that. How can we push them and close that achievement gap? Those are the questions that I'm asking. Like, how are we going to take the lessons that we learned and make them into a positive so that we better the education for everyone in Connecticut?
Well, do you think that someday we'll look back and see that's what happened? That by exposing those inequities, by essentially stressing schools to see where the weaknesses are so they can be addressed, is that going to be a positive outcome?
That's my biggest hope. That is truly my biggest hope. Out of everything that we've gone through, you know, you have to look at, you know, there's a purpose for everything. And maybe that's what it is, that we find out, we expose the inequities for what they are, and we find out ways that we hadn't thought of before that actually moves us forward.
Well, I certainly hope so. We have some Q&A from participants. Now, let's see, the first question, if I'm reading into this right, the teacher union's recommendations, what do they mean for school reopening? Will these recommendations be taken seriously? Is there a chance that they will influence what schools eventually do?
I'm not sure what you mean by the recommendations. Are you by the state?
Well, the recommendations by teachers unions, for example, the recommendation to delay opening for 2 weeks. Does that have a shot, or is this something that isn't going to happen? Or is that an unfair question?
Again, it's, I would just say right now, there is so much stress. We know that, you know, a lot of districts are going to open in 2 weeks. The stress of the unknown is really what's keeping our educators and paraprofessionals up at night. They just don't know what's going to happen. So I personally think delaying that 2 weeks is just going to add to that stress. However, like I said in the beginning, I understand there are school systems that aren't ready. So I think it comes down to, we need our, and if we're going to put it on the unions, we need our union leaders, and you could have up to 5 to 6 union leaders in a school district sit down and talk about what is safest for our school community, including parents, including, you know, the educators, including everyone. What makes it best for our communities to succeed? And we do have a voice in that. But as we talked about before, you know, I don't think striking is an issue. So it's a fine line.
Sounds like it's a very fine line, yes. And as far as walking that line, I think you're the person who can do it.
Thank you.
We have one more Q&A, and it's actually a question for me. Will this webinar be available for viewing later? I tuned in late, and the answer to that question is yes. This webinar and all the previous ones are online at the PATH YouTube channel. You can get there by going to YouTube and searching for PATH, Parent to Parent, Family Voices of Connecticut, or go to the PATH website, pathct.org. Click around, you'll find a link to the webinars that are on YouTube. Jan, I want to thank you. Thank you for appearing, and I wish you the best of luck. This school year certainly is shaping up to be one for the record book.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me and for hearing our teachers and our paraeducators' voices.
Okay, and before we sign off, I'd like to call back Audra and Cindy. Thank you. Thank you for your contributions. And I hope to see you 1 week from today on August 25th for our next edition of Answers, which will feature clinical psychologist Adrian Smaller. Until then, be well as the journey continues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now.
Take care.